Yeah, it's nice. It's very relaxed, quite an easy place to live compared to London.
Yes.
Which I lived in London for a long time, and it's just time for a change, I think.
Right.
The name Fort Romeau comes from, basically, it's a bit of a silly story, but I'd already made my first record and sent it off to the record label, 100% Silk, and they needed to, you know, we needed a name or a name for the project because I didn't have one. I was just making the music, and I didn't want to put it under my own name because I wanted it to be something aside from my own person. So I was staying near a town in the south of France called Fort Romeau, and so I just basically came up with a variation on that. So it's not, I'd like to come up with some big conceptual answer that was really clever about why I would choose that name, but really it's simply a matter of, you know, coincidence and fate, which is fine, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the label that me and Ali started called Chin Chin, I guess the name is French, but also I think Spanish, I was saying before, I think Spanish people also say Chin Chin, so I'm not sure, you know, which is the original. But the name, we like that name just because the idea with the label is that it's always releasing split 12 inches, so different artists on each side every time. So it's the idea of like cheers or like coming together, and it being two short words kind of is again kind of reflective of it being two sides. Yeah, Ali TILLET, who he runs some parties. He did a party for a long time at Plastic People in London.
Yeah. And
then he does other events there too, and he's got fingers in some other pies as well. But yeah, so I've known him for quite a while, so we decided just one day in the pub that it would be a good idea.
Yes.
And then we did it. My favourite labels at the moment, maybe, I mean, Heaven Discs, John Talbot's label, I think is always putting out really good stuff. I play almost all of their records I end up playing. I think Innovisions have done a lot of good records already this year. They're kind of moving, it feels like they're moving into a different direction, which is really cool. I'm also a big fan of, God, there's so many, I think there's so many good labels and so much good music at the moment. And another label I'm really, really into, which I only just discovered, is the band Soulwax. You know those guys?
Soulwax?
Yeah.
It's an old project.
Yeah. So they have a record label called Dewey, and they have a big studio actually in, I think it's in Ghent. And basically they put out a series of, they set up a label last year and they've been putting 12 inches out. Lots of really cool, like Italo-y disco stuff, and also maybe some more krautrock influenced. Yeah. But I only heard about it maybe 2 weeks ago, and I bought every record in their back catalogue, and that's a really good label, I think. I think when you're creating any work, and I think it goes across the board, I don't think it's just in music. I feel like there's a tendency as you develop a craft to reduce things down, not to simplify them and make them more basic, but to refine everything and get to a point where everything that exists, either in the piece of music or on the canvas, if it's a painting, everything is there for a reason and everything has a meaning. And I think that it's just about stripping away all of the superfluous information, you know? And I think that when you start off and when you maybe are more of an amateur, you tend to add layers and layers and piles, and something isn't good enough, so you think, oh, I'll put something on top of it and that's going to fix it. But actually what you realize is that you need to make the core things in the track or in your drawing or whatever it is, you know, those things need to speak clearly and they need to say something that's defined and meaningful. And if you have that, you only need, you know, it's like a conversation. You only need two voices to have a good conversation, as long as people are saying intelligent words. You know, if we have 10 people all shouting over each other, we're not really getting anywhere, you know. I think it's a similar dynamic with music, you know. Everything has a space and everything needs some space to breathe. And I think that you learn and you develop that over time. And I feel like I'm only getting to a point where I'm starting to really appreciate the nuances in that. Yeah, I mean those guys are pure reductionists. I think they take it like almost ideologically so far, especially someone like, if you listen to James Blake's music, it's kind of like, what's the absolute least that can happen and it still be interesting? And I think that he, you know, it's not necessarily always to my taste, his music, but I think that he is someone who really understands that idea and really takes it to its kind of end conclusion within the parameters that he's working in. And I think Nicolas Jarre is someone who's in a similar maybe mental space. That's what it seems like to me as a listener anyway. Oh, well, I buy so many records at the moment, but to pick three, I'll pick three that I bought this week that I really love. One is an old one. It's actually French. It's by Laurent Garnier and also some other guys under the name Choice. It's that. Yeah, I think so. Oh no, no, not this one. It's I think the band is called Choice. I always forget the name of what the record.
Saint-Germain with some.
Oh yeah?
Yeah?
Well maybe. Yeah, I don't actually know.
Yeah.
But it's the Acid Eiffel, this track, which is like a real classic techno one. But I always wanted to have it on the vinyl, but it was a bit expensive and I always put it off, and then I bought it eventually. So I love that track, and I'm glad I own that on vinyl. A new one I really like is by Chimera, who is, I don't know where he's from. I think he lives in Berlin. It's on Cocoon.
And you play it in your last podcast?
Yeah, I put it in. Yeah, in that podcast. That's right, in the one for Groove magazine. That's called. I don't know what it's called. I'm really bad with the names of tracks because
it was
I
a
buy.
remix, no?
No, I think it's an original track.
Yeah.
But I always go by the. Whenever I buy it, I know, I listen to it and then I buy it, and then when I'm picking it to DJ, it's just I pull it out of the bag and it's like, oh, it's the record with the green sticker, or it's the record with the drawing on the front. It's only if I play something for a long time that I'm actually like, what's this record actually called? So a lot of the time it takes a while for me to even know what the name is. And then another record is, I really like the new Lauer record on Robert Johnson. I mean, I always buy every record he puts out, I think, and they always work for me. Buana is a guy who's doing a record on our label Chin Chin for the next release. I met him through a mutual friend of ours, Avalon Emerson, and she introduced me to his music, and then he sent me some of these tracks, and it was this kind of like really cool disco kind of Italo feeling to the track, so I really just immediately we liked that and we decided to want to put that out. But he's like a producer, he does all sorts of stuff. He's got loads of different kind of projects and different ideas, but these tracks were kind of really perfect for what we're into. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on, especially in terms of the clubs. I mean, obviously here in Lyon, you've got a couple of like really good clubs, and in Paris, I think it's quite good now. Whereas maybe in the recent past, it was kind of a bit shaky. But now I think Rex is really a great club still. There's Concrete. I played a new one that opened the other day that was really good. I can't remember what it was called though. My favourite club to play in, it's the old cliche, but it's probably Panorama Bar. It sounds like such a stupidly obvious thing to say, but it is a very special place to play. But honestly, there are so many good places to play, and I play so many more good gigs in places that I think are really good than I do bad ones. I feel like there's really a lot of good places around, and it's hard to pick one, but maybe be boring and pick Panorama Bar like everybody else. Yeah, well, I suppose with the internet, it's very easy now for people to share a lot of music, for people to have access to a lot of different music, which is good. I think there's lots of people who kind of bemoan the developments and technological developments, but at the end of the day, you can't go against these things. They're going to happen regardless. So it's a case of what's the positive things you can take from it. And the positive things are that more people have access to more music, that's good. You know, it's easier to share music, and that's good. But I suppose the negative side to that is that there's so much more music, there's so much more to get through. And this is one of the reasons why I primarily buy records as the way I listen to music, because it's a way of funneling down some of the information, you know? So instead of maybe listening to 1,000 tracks a week from the email promos, I just listen to maybe like 100 tracks in the record store, which is still way too much, you know? It's still more than one person can really take in, but that's a good way of channeling some of that information. Yeah, I mean, it was just, for me it was simply a case of I wasn't comfortable with it, with being professionally associated with somebody who would publicly espouse those types of views. So although I think the internet can get a bit crazy, you know, in terms of like vitriolic hate against people, I do think that, you know, you have, if you have the freedom to speak, you also have the responsibility to what you say. And I think that if he was prepared to make a statement like that, he has to be responsible for those words, and he has to accept that people are going to react against something like that. And I think that it's only reasonable that people would want to disassociate themselves from him if they find those views to be offensive, and lots of people did. And for me it was just simply a way of saying, you know, I kind of a personal, like I said in my post about it, it's just a personal rejection of that, really. I don't know the guy personally, I've never met him, so I can't say anything about him, but you know, it's just, I wasn't prepared to be associated with that.